Minneapolis, known for its progressive spirit and vibrant communities, has long prided itself on being a city that welcomes newcomers and values diversity. But recently, it has become the epicenter of a heated national debate, drawing the attention of both local and national media. The crisis erupted after two violent confrontations involving ICE agents, one resulting in the tragic death of Renee Nicole Good, a beloved community member, and another leaving a Venezuelan immigrant wounded and hospitalized. These incidents ignited fear and outrage across Minneapolis, with residents and officials demanding answers, transparency, and accountability from those in power. Protests and vigils swept the city, as many saw these shootings as part of a troubling pattern of aggressive federal enforcement that has left communities feeling vulnerable and unheard. City leaders quickly challenged the federal narrative, framing the events as an assault on local autonomy and a violation of the city's values. The situation escalated beyond local news, becoming a national flashpoint over immigration, law enforcement, and the reach of federal power into local affairs. Emotions ran high as a grieving community clashed with a determined administration, each side holding firm to their beliefs and demanding to be heard. Minneapolis now stands at the center of a critical debate about justice, safety, and the delicate balance of power in America's democracy. The nation watches closely, forced to confront tough questions about the relationship between communities and the federal government, and what kind of future we want to build together. Local leaders didn't hold back in their criticism, making their voices heard loud and clear. Representative Ilhan Omar stepped forward, directly accusing the Trump administration of weaponizing ICE as a means of political retribution. She argued that Minneapolis was being singled out because of its progressive values and outspoken stance on immigration and social justice. Omar described the sudden surge of ICE agents as a paramilitary force, deployed not to uphold the law, but to instill chaos and fear in the community. She warned that this show of force was meant to send a chilling message to other cities that dared to challenge federal authority. According to Omar, this was a calculated move designed to provoke unrest and justify even more severe federal crackdowns in the future. Mayor Jacob Frey echoed her concerns, calling the ICE surge an invasion that was intended to undermine the authority of local officials and intimidate the city's residents. Standing side by side, Omar and Frey presented a united front, insisting that Minneapolis was being punished for its political beliefs and its willingness to stand up to the federal government. They accused federal officials of using law enforcement as a tool to intimidate political opponents, escalate tensions, and create a spectacle of overwhelming force in the city. Their statements reframed the entire debate, shifting the focus from a simple policy disagreement to what they described as a fundamental challenge to the principles of democracy and local self-governance. The nation quickly took notice, as the controversy grew beyond immigration enforcement, and became a flashpoint in the larger debate over the abuse of federal power and the rights of cities to govern themselves. In the days that followed, Minneapolis emerged as a powerful symbol of resistance, with many across the country rallying against what they saw as a dangerous overreach by the federal government. The Trump administration fired back, rejecting claims of political retribution. White House spokeswoman Abigail Jackson defended ICE agents as public servants enforcing federal law under increasingly hostile conditions. She cited a dramatic rise in assaults against ICE officers, blaming inflammatory rhetoric from Democratic leaders for endangering agents' lives. The administration portrayed ICE as heroes, a necessary line of defense against crime and lawlessness. From their perspective, any chaos in Minneapolis was a consequence of confronting illegal activity that local leaders refused to address. The White House insisted ICE was simply doing its job and accused critics of undermining the rule of law. This sharp divide underscored the deep political rift at the heart of the controversy. Each side blamed the other for the unrest, fueling a national debate over law enforcement and accountability. The conflict escalated when President Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act, a rarely used law allowing the president to deploy the military on U.S. soil. He warned Minnesota's leaders to obey the law or face federal intervention. The Insurrection Act, dating back to 1807, is meant for extreme crises, not routine law enforcement. Its use would bypass state authority, letting the president send troops directly into cities, Critics called this a dangerous overreach, while supporters saw it as a show of strength. Although Trump later said the act wasn't needed right now, the threat lingered, casting a shadow over the debate. The mere mention of military intervention turned Minneapolis into a constitutional battleground. The stakes had never been higher for the city or the nation. At the center of the storm is ICE, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Created in 2003, ICE enforces immigration and customs laws inside the country, separate from border enforcement. Its two main divisions, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, which tackles crimes like trafficking and smuggling, and Enforcement and Removal Operations, ERO, responsible for arresting and deporting undocumented immigrants. The ERO division in particular has become a lightning rod in the immigration debate. Supporters see ICE as essential for national security and the rule of law. Critics argue its tactics are aggressive and inhumane, tearing families apart and spreading fear. In sanctuary cities like Minneapolis, ICE's presence is viewed as a direct challenge to local values. This fundamental clash over ICE's role is what made the Minneapolis crisis so explosive. The Minneapolis conflict exposes two irreconcilable views on immigration enforcement. The Trump administration and its supporters champion law and order, insisting ICE is fulfilling a vital duty by removing those who break federal law. They argue that strong enforcement deters illegal immigration and protects communities from crime. For them, the unrest is a necessary byproduct of confronting a long-ignored problem. On the other side, community leaders like Omar and Frey see ICE's tactics as collective punishment, traumatizing neighborhoods and tearing families apart. They argue most undocumented immigrants are hard-working contributors, not criminals. The fear extends beyond deportation to racial profiling, harassment, and a breakdown of trust. Residents worry anyone who looks Latino or Somali could be targeted, creating a climate of constant anxiety. For these communities, the social damage far outweighs any perceived benefits of aggressive enforcement. The debate is not just about law, but about the human cost of how it's enforced. The accusations against ICE weren't just political. They were backed by disturbing reports from Minneapolis residents. Omar's office received a flood of calls describing chaotic, intimidating enforcement tactics. Allegations included widespread racial profiling, with agents targeting people based on appearance rather than evidence. Reports described aggressive arrests, cars forced off the road, windows smashed, and excessive force used. Some U.S. citizens were allegedly detained and later released, without charges, a serious violation of civil liberties. These stories painted a picture of law enforcement operating outside normal boundaries, fueling fear and mistrust. Critics argued that such tactics undermine public safety and the rights of all residents. The claims of denied legal access and lack of explanation for detentions deepened concerns. For many, these actions were less about justice and more about asserting federal power. The controversy over ICE's methods became a rallying point for those demanding reform and accountability. The Minneapolis crisis quickly became a national symbol of America's deep divisions over immigration and federal power. For Democrats, it was evidence of Trump's authoritarian overreach, using federal agents and the threat of military force to punish political opponents and intimidate minorities. For Republicans, it was a necessary stand for law and order, blaming local leaders for obstructing federal law and siding with undocumented immigrants. Every action and statement was amplified by partisan media, turning a local dispute into a proxy war for the nation's political battles. The outcome in Minneapolis now carried implications for the entire country. It raised urgent questions about the balance of power between federal, state, and local governments. The rules for federal law enforcement in American cities were suddenly up for debate. Minneapolis forced the nation to confront where the lines should be drawn. Why should the Minneapolis crisis matter to you? Even if you live far from Minnesota, the events unfolding there ripple across the entire country, touching every American life in ways both seen and unseen. Because it tests the core principles of American democracy, principles that have shaped our nation for centuries and continue to define who we are as a people. It's not just about immigration, it's about the relationship between citizens and government, about how power is exercised and checked, and about whether our voices truly matter in the halls of power. The crisis challenges the limits of presidential power, raising urgent questions about accountability and the balance between national security and individual rights. And it puts a spotlight on the rights guaranteed to all, reminding us that these protections are not just words on paper, but promises that must be defended. The outcome will set a precedent for how federal agencies operate in local communities, influencing the way law is enforced and how justice is served for years to come. It forces us to ask, what kind of country do we want to be? Are we willing to accept federal intervention without local input, or do we demand a say in how our communities are governed? Should federal agents act without local consent, or should local leaders have the power to protect their residents from overreach? What kind of law enforcement do we want? One that works with the community, or one that imposes its will from above? Allegations of wrongful detention and denial of legal rights threaten protections for everyone, not just immigrants. When rights are eroded for some, they are weakened for all. The Fourth Amendment and the right to counsel are at stake, cornerstones of our justice system that safeguard every American from government abuse. The threat to use the Insurrection Act raises profound questions about the military's role in civilian life, and whether force should ever be used to settle domestic disputes. Using troops for domestic law enforcement blurs the line between democracy and occupation, challenging our most fundamental beliefs about freedom and self-governance. Minneapolis is a live test of our nation's most basic values, a moment when ideals are measured against reality, and the world is watching how we respond. The answers we choose will shape the future for every American, defining not just what happens in Minneapolis, but what kind of country we will be for generations to come.